Have you ever thought about what happens to souls after death? I don't want to scare you, but there is something you need to know that will change how you think about what happens after we die. Soviet General Yevgeny Liventsov, a man who fought in the war, took part in secret military projects, and spent his whole life studying science, made a surprising statement. He said that when you die, your soul doesn't just disappear. He believed that your soul goes to a special place that is hidden from most people. There, the soul either becomes pure or continues to feel sorry for its sins. But the most terrible thing is what happens to those people who do not pass the test. Liventsov says that he met the higher mind after he died. This is the space where billions of souls now live, and why it causes fear even in those who have spent their entire lives exploring the afterlife. Watch the video all the way through to find out the truth that has been kept secret for hundreds of years. In 2011, Yevgeny Liventsov retired. It seemed that a quiet life of well-deserved rest, far from the stressful everyday life of war, was now opening up before him. But fate had prepared a test for him that would change him forever. 2 years after retiring, he was suddenly struck by a stroke. His condition was critical, and the doctors helplessly threw up their hands. He was taken to the Budenko military hospital, where they saved the lives of soldiers and officers, fought for each patient until their last breath. But even there, the medical reports left no hope. Only dry, emotionless facts were recorded. A deep coma, absent reflexes, a completely hopeless state. It seemed that the general's days were already numbered, that the end was near. However, the most amazing thing happened later, when Yevgeny Liventsov said that at that moment he felt no pain, no fear, no horror. He felt only an unusual lightness, as if he had separated from his own body. And then, on the 9th day, when everyone had already accepted the inevitable, something happened that no one could have expected. Suddenly his eyes opened, and the man who had been considered hopeless began to breathe evenly. His heart beat steadily, and his body showed no signs of a stroke. The doctors were shocked. They had seen many such patients, knew how the disease progressed, and understood that recovery from a serious blow takes months or even years. But Liventsov did not simply wake up. He seemed completely renewed. His body functioned perfectly, as if nothing had happened. What happened during these 9 days, when the man was already buried in his mind and he suddenly returned to life without the slightest explanation? Yevgeny himself had the answer. Later he admitted that during this time his soul seemed to leave the physical world. He saw something that cannot be described from a scientific point of view. He met with a higher intelligence which did not just observe him, but entered into a dialogue with him. He heard the words, "You will wake up on the 9th day and be healthy." Then Liventsov did not understand why exactly 9 days and why this happened to him, but the main prediction was confirmed. After his recovery, he felt an unusual and incomprehensible urge to take a pen and paper. He simply sat down at the table and his hand began to write on its own. What is amazing is that he said that these words did not appear in his consciousness as if they descended from above. They passed through him, as if someone was guiding his hand. Thus, the first message from the Supreme Mind arose. It was clear, alarming, and mysterious. It spoke of future events, the future of humanity, the fate of the soul. But the main thing was that he had to fulfill a special mission. Yevgeny Liventsov realized that he had not been returned by chance. He was obliged to convey important truths to the world. But would he succeed? Convince people if his story sounded too fantastic to be true? What exactly did the Supreme Intelligence tell Yevgeny Liventsov? His messages were not just revelations. They carried knowledge that could change the perception of the very essence of existence. They touched on questions that humanity had been asking itself for millennia. Who are we? Where did we come from? And what awaits us after death? The Supreme Intelligence presented itself as a majestic, all-encompassing energy structure that was beyond human understanding. It was not just an entity, not a collective mind, and not a deity. It was something completely different, going beyond the usual ideas. The Supreme Intelligence was not tied to any one place. It encompassed the entire solar system and went beyond it. Yevgeny Liventsov could not convey in words how exactly he heard or saw it, because these were not ordinary words. It was a stream of pure information that did not require translation or deep reflection. It simply penetrated the consciousness, and its meaning became instantly clear. One of the most amazing revelations was the message from the higher mind, that the human soul is much more complex than is commonly believed. It does not appear only at the moment of birth, and does not cease to exist after death. The soul lives forever, passing through many stages of change and evolution. Before incarnation, the higher mind influences the soul, forming in it the features of the person's future life. It is then that the main characteristics of the personality, natural inclinations and talents are laid down. This is not predetermination or a pre-written script of fate, but a unique set of data with the help of which the soul must pass certain tests. To the question of why all this is necessary, the higher mind answered very simply. Human life is not a random process, but a chain of lessons that contribute to the development of the soul. Each person gets his own path, but the choice remains with him. He can consciously accept these opportunities for spiritual growth, or reject them, closing himself in the material world, obeying the instincts that completely control animals. A human being is a different creature, guided not only by reason but also by emotions, feelings, and intuition. All of this is the result of the deepest tuning of the soul, which began long before birth. And what is very important is that death does not mean the end. After a person leaves the material world, the soul does not disappear. It retains its individuality. All accumulated memory, experience, and emotions. The soul does not dissolve in the emptiness of space. It passes into the spiritual dimension, where it continues to exist, but in a new form. Yevgeny Liventsov understood that life is much deeper and more extensive than it seems at first glance, and our consciousness is only a small part of a huge process that covers not only the reality we see. The Supreme Mind revealed to him why he received this knowledge. Humanity is on a dangerous threshold, and someone must convey this important warning. When a person's life comes to an end, many are sure that it is the end of the road, full of darkness and oblivion. But is this really the case? There are amazing, frightening, and at the same time majestic ideas about the afterlife, which are much more complex and multifaceted. At the moment of death, the soul separates from the physical body and begins its real journey. Unlike the body, which remains in the material world, the soul retains individuality, personality, and even memory. Interestingly, memory is not simply stored in the soul, it is duplicated. The Supreme Intelligence reported that each soul has an energy double, the finest copy of a person's consciousness, a kind of archive where all the information about his life is concentrated. Thoughts, actions, emotions, fears, victories and defeats, as well as the most intimate secrets hidden deep inside. This double does not disappear, but moves to a special field of memory, where the entire history of mankind is stored. It is there that the records of each of us are concentrated. Memories of everyone who has ever lived, felt, loved and suffered. That is where they go. That is why nothing disappears without a trace. But what happens to the soul itself? This is where the most important thing begins. Consciousness decides where exactly the soul will go in the first time after leaving the body. The orbit of souls is a place of eternal repentance. Those who have lived their lives in evil, with cruelty and hatred, go there. It is a secret and disturbing space, located near the earth, moving along the same path as the moon, but invisible to the human eye. These souls do not go to hell, as is often described in religious teachings. Their fate is real punishment. There is no fire, demons, or physical torment here, but there is something much more terrible: endless repentance. The soul relives all earthly actions again and again. Imagine a person who has done evil, caused pain and ruined destinies all his life. Now he will have to experience forever the pain that he once caused others. This pain is not physical, but a deep awareness and suffering of the soul. Each time it sees its actions through the eyes of those it has offended and betrayed. It is like an endless dream from which it is impossible to wake up. But there is something even more frightening. Sometimes the souls in orbit do not survive this test, lose their integrity, and their energy dissipates into the vastness of space. In this case, they simply disappear. This means that their existence completely ceases forever. The space called the abode of souls is intended for purification, but not all spirits are doomed to suffer. Those who have lived honestly and kindly, who have sought light and understanding, end up there. This place is completely different from the orbit. If the orbit is a zone of pain and torment, then the abode is like a harmonious space. The higher mind describes it as a huge oblong cylinder that hovers in the vastness of the universe. Its size is comparable to the diameter of the moon, but it remains invisible and untouched by living beings. Souls here do not suffer, but undergo a process of purification, freeing themselves from the weight of earthly experiences and fears, understanding the true nature of existence, and realizing that life in the physical world was only one stage of the journey. What happens next is that some souls choose to remain in the abode forever, finding peace and becoming part of the great plan of the universe. Others return to the material world, where they will have to undergo further trials, gain new experience, and correct past mistakes. However, the most amazing thing about this process is that it is not endless. There are spirits who have reached such a level of consciousness that they no longer need to return. They pass on to another higher world, which even the Supreme Mind only hints at. This is not the end, but only a transition. What awaits us on the other side depends on how worthily we live our lives. Why did the Supreme Mind reveal this knowledge to people? The answer turned out to be alarming. This is not an act of goodwill or an attempt to open the curtain of secrets. There was an expectation hidden behind these revelations. The Supreme Intelligence warned humanity it was on the brink of destruction. It was not only about physical destruction, cataclysms and wars, but also about the spiritual collapse of man, about the threat to his ability to think, feel, and create material goods. Traditional values, which for centuries served as the basis of the human soul, were displaced by power, money, thirst for pleasure, and comfort. People stopped asking questions, stopped looking for meaning. They simply consumed. And the worst thing was that this process was irreversible. The Supreme Intelligence explained that this was not the first time humanity had encountered a dead end. It said that before the current era, the world had experienced two similar cycles: an upsurge, a flowering of technology and power, and then destruction and complete collapse. What happened to the people of those times? Where are their cities and knowledge? Why do archaeologists not find traces of those civilizations? The answer is stunning. Between these eras, there were huge time intervals, reaching 16,000 years. That is how long it took the Earth to recover from another disaster. There is another frightening fact. Time after time, the higher intelligence tried to intervene, gave chances and knowledge, warned about risks. But people did not listen. They continued to destroy until they reached the point of no return. And now the moment has come when this point is approaching again. The main threat to humanity is already on the threshold. Greed is what the higher mind explains as the most powerful threshold. It penetrates deep into consciousness and deprives a person of sight, turning him into a creature that obeys only instincts. Greed erases human features, revealing animal nature, and makes people destroy the world around them, enter into wars, betray each other, and destroy spiritual knowledge. It is greed that has repeatedly become the cause of the death of entire civilizations. The higher mind has already made attempts to correct this order, sending people knowledge that can break this destructive cycle. However, each time, everything repeated itself again. Today we are faced with the question of whether we will have time to stop, or will we repeat the fate of those who lived before us? Is there a method to prove the reality of the spiritual world? Skeptics will say that all this is just fantasy, illusion, a figment of our imagination. However, many questions arise. Why do we sometimes have a premonition inside us, a voice that warns of danger, and by listening to it, we avoid trouble? Why are there so many examples in history when scientists, artists, poets, and thinkers were suddenly illuminated by ideas that could change the world? The Supreme Mind explains these phenomena through the presence of a thinking double. This double is an entity that accompanies a person from birth until death. It is not a copy of the body, not a spirit, and not an astral projection. It is an energy structure that is closely connected to the human consciousness at a deep level. The double knows everything about its owner, his fears, weaknesses, dreams, and experiences. It observes, analyzes, but most importantly, it is always there and influences our lives. The feeling when a person is on the threshold of a choice and is threatened by danger often manifests itself as a signal from a double. Sometimes it is a feeling of anxiety, inexplicable fear, a premonition. And sometimes it is an insistent inner voice that says, "Don't go there. Don't do this. Stop." However, why does not everyone hear this voice? The higher mind explains that in our days man has lost touch with the spiritual sphere. In the endless race for material values, We have stopped listening to our intuition, drowned out the inner voice, and lost trust in our own feelings. There are also more obvious confirmations of the existence of the spiritual world. One of such unusual phenomena described by the higher mind is insight. This is a sudden appearance in the head of a thought that seems excessively complex and complete, as if it came from outside. Famous scientists and inventors have repeatedly told about such moments of inspiration. For example, Nikola Tesla claimed that he saw in his mind the finished designs of his devices, even before he began working on them. Dmitri Mendeleev spoke of sudden insights that he could not explain rationally. Where do such ideas come from? The higher mind claims that this is not the result of the work of the human brain, but real information coming from the higher spheres, space and the spiritual world. Some people are capable of not only receiving such insights as flashes of genius, but also consciously establishing contact with spiritual dimensions. Clairvoyants are called guides between worlds. Among them are those who are born with an unusual gift of perceiving other realities and are able to serve as a link between our world and the higher spheres. They are often called clairvoyants or mediums, but they are called prophets for a reason. They not only sense upcoming events, but are also able to directly interact with the spiritual world, receive information from there, and sense the energies of people around them. This gift is not just a privilege. It requires enormous sacrifices. The higher mind warns that people with such abilities pay a very high price for them, because their vital energy is spent much faster than that of ordinary people. They experience enormous stress, and the physical body often cannot withstand contact with spiritual forces. Many clairvoyants live very short lives, facing illness, depression, and exhaustion. The gift received can become a real curse if used for bad purposes. This is the serious warning expressed by Evgeny Liventsov. He did not call himself a clairvoyant, but he was convinced that his knowledge was not given by chance. In his opinion, the higher mind is trying to convey the most important message through him. He warned that humanity is on the threshold of serious changes, and only the awareness of one's spiritual nature can save the world. The question is whether people will hear this voice and accept this warning or ignore it as before, continuing on the path of destruction. The answer depends on each of us, on our choice and awareness. It depends only on us whether the future will change or we will repeat the mistakes of the past.